Ethan Reed had never felt smaller in his entire life. The elevator of Hale Tower moved so smoothly it barely felt like it was moving at all. Soft golden lights reflected off the mirrored walls, showing him exactly how wrong he looked in this place. Faded blue jeans, a clean but old dark flannel shirt, work boots that still had tiny flecks of oil on them, no matter how hard he had scrubbed the night before. He kept his hands deep in his pockets so the permanent dark lines under his fingernails wouldn't show. When the doors opened on the 60th floor, a young woman in a perfect black dress was already waiting for him. "Mr. Reed, they're ready for you," followed her down a long hallway lined with glass walls and abstract paintings that probably cost more than his truck. At the end of the hallway stood double doors made of dark wood. She pushed them open and stepped aside. The conference room was enormous. One entire wall was pure glass, showing the city stretched out far below like a living map. A long table of polished black stone ran down the center. 12 people in expensive suits sat around it. Some looked curious, some looked annoyed. A few looked openly judgmental. At the head of the table sat Victoria Hale. 6 months ago, she had been bleeding and unconscious in his arms on the side of a dark highway. Today she looked every inch the woman the business world feared and respected, sharp black blazer, hair pulled back, expression calm and unreadable. But when her eyes found his, something softer passed through them for just a second. "Thank you for coming, Ethan," she said. Her voice was steady. "Please sit." He sat in the chair they had left empty for him. The leather was so soft it made him uncomfortable. Victoria looked around the table, then back at him. "Most of you already know the story. 6 months ago, this man saved my life. He stopped on a rainy night when no one else did. He pulled me from a car that was about to catch fire. He stayed with me until the ambulance came. Then he left without giving his full name to the press or asking for a single thing." A few board members nodded stiffly. They had all read the private reports. Victoria continued, "Since that night, I have tried many times to thank him properly. I offered to cover his daughter's medical care. I offered a better apartment. I offered financial help so he wouldn't have to work 3 jobs anymore. He refused everything." She paused, letting the words settle. "Today I'm making one final offer, publicly, in front of every person at this table, so there can be no confusion later." She slid a black leather folder down the long table. It stopped directly in front of Ethan. He stared at it for a moment before opening it. Inside, resting on dark velvet, was a cashier's check. "Pay to the order of Ethan Reed's." $1 million. The silence that followed was heavy. Someone on the left side of the table actually exhaled in surprise. Another person whispered, "That's generous." Victoria's voice remained calm and clear. "This money will take care of Lily's heart condition for the rest of her life. It will buy them a safe home in a better neighborhood. It will allow Ethan to stop destroying his body working day and night. All he has to do is accept it." Every pair of eyes in the room turned to the single father in the flannel shirt. Ethan looked down at the check. The number was so large it almost didn't make sense. $1 million. He could see the future it offered in a single flash. Lily sleeping in a real bedroom with a nightlight shaped like a star. No more counting the days until the next specialist visit. No more falling asleep in his truck between shifts. No more lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if he would lose her. His throat felt tight. He closed the folder slowly and pushed it back across the table toward Victoria. Then he lifted his head and spoke. "I can't take it." A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. One of the younger board members let out a short, incredulous laugh. Another muttered, "Unbelievable." Victoria didn't look shocked. She simply watched him, waiting. Ethan rested his rough hands on the table and continued, his voice quiet but steady enough to reach every corner of the room. "When I stopped that night, I didn't know who you were. You could have been anyone. I didn't pull you out of that car because I thought there would be a reward at the end. I did it because you needed help and I was there. If I take this money now, everything changes. Every time you look at me, a part of you might wonder if I'm still here because of you or because of the $1 million. Every time my daughter runs to you and hugs you, I'll wonder if she only gets to keep smiling because a check made it possible." Looked around at the expensive suits and perfect haircuts. "I work 3 jobs because that's what I have to do to keep my little girl alive. I'm not ashamed of that. I don't need $1 million to be a good father, and I don't need $1 million to love you." Last words hung in the air. Victoria's eyes shone, but she didn't look away from him. Ethan took a slow breath and finished what he had come to say. "I'll take something else instead, if you're still offering." "What do you want?" Victoria asked softly. He met her eyes across the long table, ignoring every powerful person watching them. "I want you to keep coming over. Keep sitting on my old couch and eating takeout with us. Keep reading those silly unicorn books to Lily until she falls asleep on your lap. Keep being the woman who makes my tiny apartment feel less empty. And one day, when the time feels right, I want the chance to ask you to stay forever, not as the billionaire who writes million-dollar checks, just as Victoria. For several long seconds, no one in the room moved or spoke. Then the oldest man at the table, Harrington, who had served on the board since Victoria's father built the company, leaned back in his chair and began to clap. The sound was slow and deliberate. One by one, other hands joined. Some clapped with real respect. Some clapped because they had no choice. But the sound filled the glass room. Victoria stood. She walked the entire length of the table, her heels quiet against the floor, until she stopped in front of Ethan. In full view of every shareholder who had ever questioned her heart, she took both of his calloused hands in hers. Her voice was low, meant only for him, but the room was silent enough that everyone heard. You just turned down $1 million in front of my entire board. That might be the most expensive "I love you" in history. Gave her the small, tired smile that only she and Lily ever received. Still the easiest decision I've ever made. That same night, Victoria's private car carried them through the city. Ethan sat beside her in the back seat, her fingers laced tightly through his. Neither of them spoke much. The weight of what had just happened still sat between them, heavy and warm. When they reached the small apartment building, the neighbor opened the door with Lily already in her arms. The second the little girl saw Victoria, she wriggled free and ran. "You came." Victoria dropped to her knees right there in the hallway and pulled Lily into a fierce hug. "I told you I would." Later, after Lily had finally fallen asleep between them on the narrow couch, Victoria rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. The only light in the room came from the small lamp in the corner. Outside, rain had started to fall again. "They're going to talk about this for weeks," she said quietly. "The board, the internet, everyone." Kissed the top of her head. "Them talk. I've got everything I need right here." The months that followed were the happiest Ethan had known since before his wife died. He cut back to 2 jobs. Lily's color improved. The private doctor Victoria had quietly arranged became a regular, kind presence in their lives. Victoria never made the help feel like charity. She simply showed up with groceries, with bedtime stories, with quiet strength when Ethan was too tired to speak. On a warm evening in early summer, Ethan drove her back to the same stretch of highway where everything had begun. The old oak tree still carried the deep scar from the crash. He parked the truck on the shoulder, walked around to her side, and dropped to one knee in the grass. The ring was simple and thin, paid for in cash from months of extra shifts. "I don't have $1 million," he said, looking up at her. "I probably never will, but I have 2 hands that know how to work, a daughter who already loves you like she's yours, and a heart that stopped belonging to me the night I carried you out of the fire. Marry me anyway." Victoria was already crying when she dropped to her knees in front of him and wrapped her arms around his neck. She whispered against his lips, "Yes, yes, yes." They married in a small garden ceremony with only Lily, a few trusted friends, and the doctor who had become family. No cameras, no headlines, just 3 people who had found something the world kept saying was impossible. Years later, when journalists still occasionally asked Victoria why she had chosen a man who once refused $1 million without hesitation, she always gave the same quiet answer: "Because he was the only man who ever looked at me and saw something more valuable than my fortune. And because when the whole world tried to buy him, he still only asked for me." Never became rich the way the world measured wealth. But every morning when he woke up to his wife's smile and his daughter's laughter in a house that finally felt whole, he knew he had already won the only thing that had ever mattered: the end.